I had quite a difficult relationship with my sister. We definitely, well, I think what often happens is when there's two girls, you don't get on, you're competitive. There's me and my sister.
Who'd have thought? Like, well,
I'm the grouchy tall one, and she's the smiley shorter one with the curly nice hair and the smile, and I'm already...
Very sweet picture.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. But we shared a bedroom, and obviously I drew a line down the middle and told her she'd be dead if she crossed the line. And we didn't have a very good relationship, and it got worse after my parents moved out to suburbia and we had our own bedrooms, because I think when you're a teenager, you go in your separate bedrooms, and then she ran away from home and stole all my savings. She stole my savings book and spent all my money, and I did hold a grudge against her for a long time. And we got on. We just knocked along the way that sisters do. But then after my mother died, I think we got on much better, and then because my mother wasn't there to kind of drive a wedge between us.
I feel I'm in a very fortunate position in that I feel that I can trust my family, but obviously it's not always the case. And I mean, Davina, I know in your life you felt betrayed.
I had something like this.
Yeah.
I had my mum sold a story. I just built bridges with my mum. We had a very complicated relationship. Get the book, you'll understand it. She sold a story about our wedding and the fact that I go to Narcotics Anonymous meetings, and that we'd gone to a meeting just before the wedding and sort of implied that I was about to relapse just before we got married, which I wasn't at all. I'd never been so happy. In fact, I was the least likely to relapse ever. And sold photos of our honeymoon, which I didn't sell pictures of our wedding, or I didn't sell pictures of the honeymoon or anything.
Private.
I was just, and I never saw her again, and my children never met her because of it. So it's really devastating, that kind of lack of trust.
Did you ever get the chance to, confront her? I don't mean necessarily.
I asked her about it, and to her it wasn't that big a deal.
I fell in love with a man who was Catholic, and I was Protestant, and my father... Do you know what an Orangeman is? You know, they march on the 12th of July. So he was a very staunch Orangeman. So when I was a bit afraid, really, to...
Well, that would have been a massive...
It was a massive choice on my part, it was. And when I introduced my dad to Don, he was a very, very nice man, I kept saying, but he's an English Catholic, he's not an Irish Catholic, because there is a kind of...
make a difference.
In dedication, there is, really. But what my father was very principled, but I admired his principles, even though I was young. I admired him. And he said he couldn't come to the wedding. Just couldn't come.
Oh, no,
and in those days, Macho Ireland, he wouldn't allow my mum to come either.
Oh.
And
she wouldn't have gone against his wishes.
She wouldn't have gone against her husband in those days. Oh. But he allowed my sister to go and allowed my brother to go. And although you would think that I would have been... Of course, I was heartbroken by that decision. But what I admired my dad for, he said to Don when we first met him, if you decide to get married, and I don't approve, because you are Catholic, but I promise you, you'll be like a son to me the day you get married. And he stuck to that, so I admired him for that.
Yeah.
So he worked it round to him, and they got on famously.
And there would have been no persuading him then, Gloria, even if you'd have cried and said, Dad, please, and I want my mum there as well.
No, he was so principled, but I knew that. And it's a strange thing to say, but because I was so young, but I admired his principles, and I knew his principles, and I knew that he wouldn't change his mind.
Well, I grew up in a family that had plenty of secrets, and to this day I don't know all of them. And I had such an acrimonious relationship with my mother. I wrote a best-selling book about it years ago, but it came about after my dad died. My sister said to me, there are no wedding photos of Mum and Dad. And my sister, we didn't have proper birth certificates, we just had copy ones, not the full thing. And my sister went to Somerset House and discovered that our parents weren't married when they had me or my sister. So my dad is my dad. He's dead, he's dead now, but my dad was my dad and my mum was, but they weren't married. And then my sister discovered that my mother had been married before to someone who was still alive. And in fact, a national newspaper found out that my mother's husband was still alive and told me where he lived.
Do you wish that your parents had told you, Janet?
I feel that I didn't know my mother, that there was always this strange relationship. She was secretive. It was the 50s. There are all sorts of reasons.
I was going to say, in that era, though, it was very secretive, and it would have been a scandal.
But don't you think it's weird that when I became well known and I was on television, she must have been anxious beyond all belief that this would come out?
I remember keeping, and I never really told the person or people who were involved, but I knew somebody once.
And we know who it is.
Yeah, you do now. Who was actually taking money from me, and I knew they were. So I was driving myself insane, thinking, have I spent it? Have I lost it? What is going on? But I had a real strong, you know, when you get that gut feeling that this particular person was taking the money, and I ended up putting my bag on the side, counting exactly what was in it, knowing that it was me and that person were the only people in the house, going back to it, and there was a portion of it missing. And I absolutely,
Did you
at
confront
that point,
them?
I didn't. And I've still to this day, I haven't said anything to them because it was somebody of an ex-partner's family member.
They will know now.
Well, yeah, they probably... Well, the person
They know who they are.
Yeah, exactly, and they've got to live with that guilt, actually, essentially, at the end of the day. But what it would have done to my relationship at the time, and probably my relationship with the family, you know, would have been far worse than asking for my money back.
And then did you have to still be around that person and deal with them in kind of social situations?
Yeah,
and
that
things?
was the worst part of it. Well, obviously, because I'm not just going to stop talking to them.
Did you just glare at them a lot?
I just remember everything they ever bought, I assumed it was with my money. And I know that sounds awful, because it probably wasn't, but I knew that they were taking from me and
I would
still
have put
happy
a
to
note in the bag with their name saying, I know you're taking it.
I had a really weird experience. It was like something out of a Hollywood movie. Years and years and years ago, I met a guy through work, a gay guy. We hit it off. We just got on brilliantly. We moved into a flat together. We went on holiday together. We were in Key West, Mecca of all gay people. I had to go with him. Yes, marvellous. He was writing his postcards, and he wrote down Nana George. And I said, oh, isn't that funny? My grandma's surname was Nana George. And he said, oh, very common in Wales, very common name. Got back home, rang me when he went back to see his mum, and he went, is your grandma called Mary Ann? I said, yes. And he went, oh, my God, we're cousins. And we were sharing a flat already. Anyway, I had loads of photo albums on the bookshelves. We got them down. I said, well, here's my grandparents' wedding. There was his grandfather. So my grandmother and his grandfather were brother and sister. Wow. And his grandfather was in all the pictures that had been on our flat shelves all that time that he'd not seen. Another picture of his mum and my mum, aged 10, who were sort of like the best of friends then, with their arms around each other in the back garden. When they were 10, our grandparents had a massive argument. The family went like that, and no one ever spoke to anybody, and it just, you know, this big separation, until I ended up sharing a flat. How many people are there in London?
Incredible.
With one of the grandsons.
And did it bring the family together?
Yeah. So we had a big party. We went down to Wales. We got his mum and my mum back together. Did the picture again of when they were 10, and yeah, it was amazing. But I kind of think no one ever knew what the feud was about, and I think the repercussions 50 years later. You know why?